The stars had been kind to humanity for 200 years. Since the day humans first reached beyond their small blue world and met the Velkoth traders near Jupiter, everything had changed. Humanity was no longer alone. They had joined the Galactic Concordat, a great alliance of 12 species who had promised to protect each other, trade with each other, and build a future together. Admiral Helena Vance stood on the bridge of the UNS Prometheus and watched the stars pass by. She was a tall woman with gray streaks in her dark hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. But today was not a day for fighting. Today was a day for celebration. The Concordat was gathering on the Kethari homeworld for a great summit. Leaders from all 12 species would meet, share food and drink, and talk about the future. Vance had served in the Joint Fleet for 30 years. She had fought beside Velkoth warriors and shared meals with Kethari diplomats. She trusted them. They were not just allies. They were friends. On the planet below, Ambassador David Chen prepared for the summit dinner. He was a patient man who had spent his life building bridges between species. His staff moved around him, checking documents and adjusting his formal uniform. Tonight, he would present new proposals for trade routes that would bring prosperity to the outer colonies. The Velkoth delegation has arrived, his assistant reported. They seem eager to begin. Chen smiled. The Velkoth had been humanity's first friends among the stars. Their ambassador had personally welcomed Chen when he first took this position. If any species could be trusted completely, it was them. The dinner hall was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings so high they disappeared into shadow. Tables were arranged in a great circle, with each species given a place of honor. Humans sat between the Velkoth and the Sithrani, surrounded by beings they had known for generations. The Kethari High Minister rose to speak. She was ancient even by her species' long-lived standards, her scaled skin pale with age. "Friends," she said, her voice carrying across the hall. "We gather tonight to celebrate 2 centuries of peace and cooperation. The Concordat has never been stronger." Chen applauded with the others. He did not notice that the Velkoth ambassador was not smiling. He did not see the Kethari guards moving quietly to block the exits. He did not know that in orbit above, every human ship was being surrounded by vessels that had once been their protectors. The first shot came without warning. A Kethari soldier fired into the human delegation. Chen watched in frozen horror as his assistant fell, a burning hole in her chest. Then chaos erupted. Screams filled the hall as soldiers from every species except humanity drew weapons and opened fire. Chen threw himself behind an overturned table. His communicator was in his hand before he could think. "This is Ambassador Chen to any human vessel. We are under attack. The Concordat has..." A Velkoth blade pierced the table and stopped inches from his face. He looked up into eyes he had once trusted. The ambassador he had called friend stared down at him with cold satisfaction. "Why?" Chen managed to ask. "Because you grow too fast," the Velkoth said. "Because in 300 years, you would rule us all. We will not allow it." Chen's last transmission reached Earth 17 minutes later. By then, the killing had spread across the galaxy. On the colony world of New Eden, families were eating dinner when Velkoth warships appeared in the sky. The planetary defense grid had been disabled by Concordat technicians who had been upgrading the systems for months. There was no warning. There was no escape. 12 million humans died in the first hour. The research station at Kepler's Rest was staffed by scientists studying a newly discovered nebula. They had no weapons. They had no warships. They had only their work and their dreams of discovery. The Kethari destroyed them anyway, burning the station to ash and leaving no survivors. Across human space, the story repeated itself. Military bases were overwhelmed by forces 5 times their size. Trading posts were surrounded and destroyed. Colony ships full of sleeping families were boarded and their passengers executed. The Concordat had planned this for years, planting spies, mapping defenses, and waiting for the perfect moment. Admiral Vance was one of the lucky ones. The Prometheus was on patrol in deep space when the attacks began. She received the emergency broadcasts and listened to humanity die. Colony after colony fell silent. Ships screamed for help and then went quiet. The voices of billions were cut short in a single terrible night. "How many ships do we have left?" Vance asked. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. "Unknown, Admiral. Communications are fragmentary. Maybe 1,000 vessels escaped, maybe fewer." Vance closed her eyes. Before the betrayal, humanity had commanded 12,000 warships. They had been proud of their fleet, though it was small compared to the elder species. Now they had almost nothing. "Set course for Earth," she ordered. "Best speed." Earth survived because of luck and stubbornness. The orbital defense grid had been built by humans alone, without Concordat involvement. When enemy ships arrived to finish the genocide, they met resistance they did not expect. The battle lasted 3 days. Earth burned, but it did not fall. When Vance finally reached home, she found a world under siege. A ring of enemy ships surrounded the planet, content to wait while humanity starved. Refugees crowded every city. The skies were filled with smoke from the orbital bombardments. Children looked up at stars that had become enemies. The Concordat broadcast their justification across all frequencies. They claimed humanity was too aggressive, too ambitious, too dangerous. They said the attacks were necessary for galactic peace. They promised that if humanity surrendered, the killing would stop. Admiral Vance listened to their lies and felt something change inside her. The woman who had served alongside aliens for 30 years, who had believed in friendship between species, who had trusted in the promise of the Concordat, that woman died with the 4 billion humans who had been murdered. In her place stood something harder, something colder, something that would not rest until justice was done. She gathered the surviving commanders and looked at faces as broken as her own. "They think they've beaten us," she said. "They think we'll beg for mercy." She stood straighter, and her voice carried the weight of every human who would never speak again. "They are wrong. We will not surrender. We will not forget. And we will make them pay for every single life they took." The commanders stared at her. Some wept. Some nodded. All of them understood. The war for humanity's survival had begun. Number: the Ember Fleet. 6 months had passed since the betrayal. Earth was still surrounded. Every day, the enemy fleet watched and waited. Every day, humanity grew weaker. Admiral Vance walked through the refugee camps that had spread across what was once Central Park. Tents stretched as far as she could see. Children played in the mud between them, their laughter strange and hollow in a world that had lost so much. These were the survivors from the colonies, the ones who had managed to escape before the killing was complete. An old woman grabbed Vance's arm as she passed. "My grandson was on New Eden," she said. "Will you find out what happened to him?" Vance looked into her eyes and saw the same question she had heard 1,000 times. She could not tell this woman that New Eden was glass now, that nothing lived there anymore. Instead, she simply said, "We are keeping records of everyone we find." It was not a lie. It was not the truth either. The United Council met in an underground bunker beneath the ruins of New Geneva. The building above had been destroyed in the first attacks, but the bunker survived. Now it served as the heart of human resistance. 12 council members sat around a table covered with reports and maps. Their faces showed exhaustion and despair. For 6 months, they had done nothing but manage death, count the losses, ration the remaining food, watch the blockade grow tighter. "We must consider surrender," said Councillor Wei, his voice heavy with grief. "The Concordat has offered terms. If we accept, they will allow humanity to survive as a subject species. We would lose our freedom, but our children would live." "Would they?" asked Councillor Okafor. "Can we trust anything they say after what they did?" The argument continued, voices rising and falling like waves. Vance listened without speaking. She had been summoned to present a military assessment, but she knew the council expected her to confirm what they already believed. There was no hope. Surrender was the only option. Finally, they turned to her. "Admiral," said the council president, "please share your assessment." Vance stood. She touched a control, and a holographic display appeared above the table. It showed the remnants of humanity's fleet. "We have 847 combat-capable ships," she said. "Most are damaged. Ammunition is limited. Our shipyard capacity is reduced to 30%. The council members shifted in their seats. The numbers were worse than they had imagined. The Concordat maintains over 200,000 warships across their combined fleets. Vance continued. "By any reasonable calculation, we cannot win this war." Councillor Wei nodded. "Then you agree that surrender?" "I did not say that." The room went silent. Vance touched another control. The display changed, showing weapon systems the council had never seen before. Before the war, Our scientists developed several weapon technologies that were deemed too dangerous for use against fellow Concordat members. Singularity torpedoes that create small black holes. Cascade missiles that cause chain reactions in enemy reactor cores. The Helios Array, which can focus stellar energy into a beam capable of destroying planets. Why were we never told about these? The president demanded. Because they violated the spirit of our alliance. Because using them would have made us monsters in the eyes of our friends. Vance's voice hardened. But our friends are dead. Our alliance is ash, and I am no longer interested in what monsters think of us. She outlined her plan. The remaining ships would be reorganized into a single fleet. Every vessel would be retrofitted with the forbidden weapons. They would not try to break the blockade or reclaim lost territory. Instead, they would make the Concordat pay for every inch of space they held. We cannot win through strength, Vance said, but we can win through cost. Every engagement must hurt them more than it hurts us. Every battle must make them question whether this war is worth fighting. Counselor Okafor leaned forward. You're talking about a war of attrition, making them bleed until they decide to negotiate. Yes, and if they don't? If they simply keep coming until we're all dead? Vance met her eyes. Then we die on our feet instead of our knees. But I don't believe it will come to that. The Concordat is an alliance of 12 species, each with their own interests and fears. They united against us because they thought we would be easy to destroy. When we prove them wrong, their unity will crack. The debate lasted for hours. In the end, the council approved her plan by a single vote. It was not hope that swayed them. It was the simple fact that surrender meant trusting the same species who had massacred billions of innocent humans, and trust was something humanity could no longer afford. Vance named her new command the Ember Fleet. When her officers asked why, she explained, a flame can be extinguished. An ember is what remains after the fire dies. It is small and easy to overlook. But if you give it fuel and breath, it becomes a flame again. That is what we are. The ember that will not die. The retrofitting began immediately. Engineers worked without sleep, installing weapons that had never been tested in combat. Crews trained for tactics that no Concordat species had ever faced. Everyone knew the odds. Everyone volunteered anyway. On the day the Ember Fleet was ready to launch its first mission, Vance addressed her crews. Her voice was broadcast to every ship, every bunker, every refugee camp on Earth. They called us the youngest species, she said. They said we were children playing among giants. They thought they could kill us in our sleep and the galaxy would forget we ever existed. She paused, letting the words sink in. They were wrong. We are not children. We are not weak. We are the species that clawed its way out of caves and learned to split atoms. We are the species that looked up at the stars and decided to reach for them. We are the species that has never, in all our history, surrendered to extinction. They thought they were extinguishing a candle. They will learn they were striking flint against steel. The fleet launched that night. 800 ships against an empire of millions. Impossible odds. Certain death, but humanity had learned something precious in the months of siege and suffering. They had learned that survival was not enough. That living on your knees was no different from dying. That some things were worth fighting for even when victory seemed impossible. And they had learned one thing more. The galaxy had shown them its true face. It was not a place of friendship and cooperation. It was a place where the weak were destroyed without mercy. Humanity would not be weak again. Number, the doctrine of thorns. The Velkoth convoy moved through space with the confidence of hunters who had never been hunted. 200 warships protected a line of cargo vessels carrying supplies to the blockade around Earth. The commander, a veteran named Kethral, watched his screens with boredom. 8 months of easy duty had made his crews soft. There was no danger here. The humans were broken. Then his sensor officer screamed. 40 human ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly in the path of the convoy. They came without warning, without demands, without any attempt at communication. They simply appeared and opened fire. Kethral shouted orders, but his crews were slow and confused. They had been trained to fight Concordat battles, where both sides announced themselves and followed ancient rules of engagement. These humans followed no rules at all. The first wave of singularity torpedoes tore through the convoy's front line. 3 Velkoth cruisers vanished into miniature black holes, pulled apart atom by atom. The formation scattered in panic, And that was when the real killing began. Human ships dove into the chaos like wolves among sheep. They fired until their weapons were empty, then rammed enemy vessels at full speed. Pilots ejected at the last moment, hoping to be recovered. Many were not. They did it anyway. Kethral watched a human destroyer crash directly into his flagship's engine section. The explosion sent his ship spinning out of control. Through the flames and debris, he saw the human pilot's face in the moment before impact. The human was smiling. When the battle ended, not a single Velkoth vessel remained intact. The humans had lost 12 ships. They had destroyed 200. Admiral Vance received the report in silence. 12 ships gone, 300 crew members dead. It was a victory, but victory had a different meaning now. Every human life was precious. Every death was a wound that might never heal. But she had also received something else. Recordings from Velkoth communications showed their commanders screaming in confusion and terror. They had never seen warfare like this. They had no idea how to respond. Good. Vance called her officers together and presented what she named the Doctrine of Thorns. A thorn is small, she explained. It cannot kill a great beast, but enough thorns, driven deep enough, will make that beast bleed. Eventually it will weaken. Eventually, it will fall. The doctrine was simple. Humanity would not fight for territory or resources. They would fight to cause maximum pain with minimum cost. Every battle would be chosen carefully to hurt the enemy where they were weakest. Every engagement would demonstrate that destroying humanity would cost more than the Concordat was willing to pay. But the war would not be fought with weapons alone. Human intelligence officers had spent months gathering information. They knew which species had participated eagerly in the betrayal and which had been reluctant. They knew the names of commanders who had ordered massacres and soldiers who had shown mercy. Most importantly, they had recordings. The broadcasts began without warning. Every frequency in Concordat space was suddenly filled with human voices. Survivors told their stories. Parents described watching their children die. Soldiers recounted the moment their allies turned on them. And underneath it all, images played in an endless loop. Cities burning, bodies floating in space, the faces of 4 billion dead. The Concordat tried to jam the signals. But human communication technology had always been superior. For every frequency they blocked, 3 more opened. The stories spread from system to system. Impossible to stop. On the Sithrani homeworld, citizens gathered in public squares to watch the broadcasts. The Sithrani were a peaceful species who had joined the betrayal reluctantly, convinced by the Velkoth and Kethari that humanity was too dangerous to be allowed to grow. Now they saw what their alliance had truly done. Many wept. Some refused to believe, but the seed of doubt had been planted. The Concordat High Command responded with fury. They ordered a massive assault on the Earth blockade, determined to end the human threat once and for all. 1,500 warships gathered, the largest fleet assembled since the betrayal itself. Vance had been waiting for this. The Ember fleet struck not at the gathering fleet, but at the supply lines feeding it. Fuel depots were destroyed. Ammunition convoys were ambushed. Communication relays were sabotaged. By the time the Concordat Armada was ready to attack, they had lost a quarter of their supplies and had no idea where the next attack would come from. The assault on Earth went forward anyway. The Concordat commanders were too proud to retreat after gathering such a force. They expected the human defenders to fight a conventional battle, ship against ship, until they were overwhelmed. Instead, the humans let them come. The blockade fleet closed around Earth, preparing for the final assault. Then the hidden defenses activated. Weapon platforms that had been dormant for months suddenly came alive. Mines that had drifted silently through the debris field detonated in synchronized patterns, and the Ember fleet, which the Concordat believed was scattered and hiding, emerged from the shadow of the moon and attacked the enemy's rear. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 700 Concordat ships had been destroyed. The blockade was broken. For the first time since the betrayal, human cargo ships could leave Earth. They did not carry soldiers or weapons. They carried refugees. Millions of survivors fleeing to hidden colonies in uncharted space, places the Concordat did not know existed. Even if Earth fell tomorrow, humanity would survive somewhere. The Concordat High Command received the casualty reports in stunned silence. They had expected to lose ships in the attack, but nothing like this. The humans had fought like demons, accepting death rather than defeat. They had used weapons that violated every rule of civilized warfare. They had turned the very debris of the battle into weapons, ramming crippled ships into enemy formations. The Velkoth admiral who had commanded the assault was found dead in his quarters the next day. He had taken his own life rather than face the shame of his failure. Vance allowed herself one night to celebrate. Then she gathered her officers and began planning the next phase. "They know now that we will not surrender," she said. "They know that every attack will cost them more than they expect. But that is not enough. We must make them fear the very idea of fighting us." She looked at the map of Concordat space, studying the territories of species who had murdered her people. "It is time to bring the war to them." The officers nodded. There was no hesitation in their eyes. The humans who had once sought friendship among the stars had been transformed by fire and blood into something new, something harder, something that would not rest until the galaxy understood the price of betrayal. The doctrine of thorns had drawn first blood. Now it would draw more. The long war. 3 years had passed since the betrayal. The war that was supposed to last weeks had become something else entirely. Something the Concordat had never expected. Something they were beginning to fear. Admiral Vance stood in the command center of Thornwood Station, hidden deep within an asteroid field that no Concordat map had ever recorded. Around her, holographic displays showed the current state of the war. Red markers indicated enemy positions. Blue markers showed human forces. There were far more red than blue. But the balance had changed. The Ember fleet had grown to 2,000 ships. Some were rebuilt from wreckage. Others were captured from the enemy, their systems modified to serve new masters. A few had been constructed in hidden shipyards, built by workers who labored without rest because they knew every ship meant another chance for humanity to survive. But ships were only part of the story. Across Concordat space, billions of humans remained trapped behind enemy lines. They were supposed to be slaves or corpses. Instead, they had become an army. Every world with a human population was now a battlefield. Factories exploded without warning. Supply convoys vanished. Concordat officials were found dead in their beds, killed by servants they had never suspected. The insurgency had no central command. It did not need one. Every human knew what had been done to their people. Every human knew what they had to do. On Velkoth Prime, a human maintenance worker named Sarah Chen had spent 2 years gaining the trust of her overseers. She smiled at their jokes. She worked hard and never complained. She memorized every security code and patrol schedule they carelessly mentioned in front of her. Then, one night, she walked into the Planetary Defense Command Center and uploaded a virus that disabled every shield generator on the continent. By the time the Velkoth realized what had happened, 3 human cruisers had appeared in orbit and destroyed the military installations below. Sarah did not survive the escape attempt. She died knowing she had hurt the species that murdered her family. There were thousands of stories like hers. Humans who sacrificed everything for a moment of revenge. The Concordat had expected broken slaves. They found enemies in every shadow. The political situation had changed as well. The Sithrani collective, haunted by the broadcasts of human suffering, had withdrawn from the war entirely. Their government faced riots whenever they tried to support the Concordat. 2 other minor species followed their example, unwilling to spend more lives on a conflict that seemed to have no end. The alliance of 12 was now an alliance of 9. And among the remaining members, cracks were spreading. The Velkoth blamed the Kethari for poor military planning. The Kethari accused the Velkoth of cowardice. Both demanded that the other species contribute more ships, more resources, more soldiers. Old grudges, buried for centuries, began to surface. Vance watched these developments with grim satisfaction. The doctrine of thorns was working. Every battle cost the Concordat more than they could afford. Every human sacrifice planted doubt in enemy minds. The Great Alliance was bleeding from wounds it could not see, but she knew it was not enough. The Concordat still had overwhelming numbers. If they united their remaining forces and committed to total war, they could still destroy humanity through sheer attrition. She needed something more, something that would break their will completely. The opportunity came when Concordat intelligence finally located Thornwood Station. They assembled a fleet of 800 ships, determined to destroy this nest of human resistance once and for all. Vance received the warning 3 days before the attack. Her officers urged retreat. The station could be abandoned, its personnel scattered to other hidden bases. But Vance had other plans. "We will not run," she said. We will give them exactly what they want. A battle. A decisive engagement. The chance to crush us once and for all. Her officers stared at her in confusion. They had spent 3 years avoiding exactly this kind of fight. They had survived by being ghosts, striking and vanishing before the enemy could respond. Vance smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Do you remember the Helios Array? The Helios Array was humanity's most terrible weapon. It had been built before the war, hidden in the outer reaches of the solar system, then moved piece by piece to a location no one expected. The asteroid field around Thornwood Station. The Concordat fleet arrived expecting easy prey. 150 human ships faced them, badly outnumbered and apparently trapped. The enemy commander gave the order to attack, confident that this day would see the end of human resistance. Then the sun exploded. Not Earth's sun. A small star at the edge of the system, barely noticed by the Concordat navigators. The Helios Array focused stellar energy into a beam of pure destruction and released it directly into the enemy formation. 600 ships died in seconds. They did not burn or explode. They simply ceased to exist, consumed by fire hotter than anything the galaxy had ever seen used as a weapon. The survivors fled in blind panic. Their formation scattered. Their communications dissolved into screams. The remaining human ships hunted them through the asteroid field, destroying any vessel that moved too slowly. When it was over, only 37 Concordat ships escaped. They carried tales of horror back to their homeworlds, tales of a weapon that could kill stars, tales of humans who laughed as they destroyed fleets, tales of an enemy that could not be beaten by any force the Concordat possessed. Vance broadcast a message across every frequency in known space. Her face appeared on screens throughout the galaxy, calm and cold. You chose to make war on humanity, she said. You killed 4 billion of our people while they slept. You murdered children in their beds. You called us friends and stabbed us in the back. She leaned forward, and her eyes burned with controlled fury. Now you will learn what that costs. We are not fighting for territory. We are not fighting for resources. We are fighting until every species that betrayed us understands the price of what they did. There will be no peace until there is justice. And we define justice. The message ended. Across the galaxy, the remaining Concordat species watched it again and again. Some raged at the human arrogance. Others calculated how many ships they had lost and how many more they could afford to lose. And in the depths of their hearts, all of them felt something they had never expected to feel toward the youngest species in the galaxy. Fear. Number. The reckoning. 6 years after the betrayal, the galaxy was a different place. The Concordat had shattered. 9 species had become 3. The Sithrani and others had not only withdrawn from the war but had begun secret negotiations with humanity, desperate to distance themselves from what they now called the Great Crime. Only the Velkoth, the Kethari, and one minor species called the Droth continued fighting. Even they were broken in all but name. Their combined fleets still outnumbered humanity's forces, but numbers meant nothing anymore. Their crews refused to engage human ships. Their officers resigned rather than face another battle. Their populations protested in the streets, demanding an end to a war that had cost them everything and gained them nothing. Admiral Helena Vance reviewed the latest intelligence reports in her quarters aboard the Prometheus. Her hair had gone completely gray in the years of war. Lines marked her face that had not been there before, but her eyes remained sharp, and her will remained unbroken. The Ember Fleet now numbered 5,000 ships. More importantly, humanity had reclaimed 6 of its lost colony worlds and established new settlements in territories the Concordat had never explored. The species that was supposed to be exterminated had instead grown stronger. The time had come to end it. Vance presented her plan to Earth's United Council. We will strike the Velkoth and Kethari homeworld simultaneously, she said. Not to destroy them, not to murder their civilians as they murdered ours. We will demonstrate that we could erase them from existence if we chose. Then we will offer them a simple choice: surrender unconditionally, or watch their worlds burn. Councillor Okafor, now president of the council, studied the plan in silence. She remembered the debate 6 years ago, when humanity had been sieged and broken. She remembered voting for Vance's desperate strategy because the alternative was slavery or death. She never imagined it would lead here. You're certain we can do this? She asked. Yes. Their defenses have been bled dry. Their people are exhausted. They have nothing left to fight with except pride. Vance's voice softened slightly. And pride is not enough against an enemy who has nothing left to lose. The council approved the plan unanimously. The Ember Fleet divided into two forces. Half moved toward Velkoth Prime under Vance's direct command. The other half approached the Kethari homeworld, led by Admiral James Okonkwo, who had risen from refugee to fleet commander during the Long War. The Velkoth detected the approaching fleet 3 days before it arrived. They scrambled every ship they had left, pulling vessels from patrol routes and supply convoys across their space. By the time the humans arrived, nearly 400 warships waited in orbit around their homeworld. Vance studied the enemy formation without emotion. 400 ships. 6 years ago, that would have been a terrifying force. Now it was simply an obstacle. "Open a channel to the Velkoth High Command," she ordered. The face that appeared on her screen was familiar. High Commander Velthos, the military leader who had overseen the Betrayal's planning, the one who had convinced the other species that humanity could be destroyed quickly and cleanly. He looked older now, his scales dull with stress. "Admiral Vance," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "You have made your point. Let us discuss terms for ending this conflict." "There is nothing to discuss," Vance replied. "Your orbital defenses will be destroyed in 6 hours. Your military will surrender unconditionally. Your leaders will stand trial for the murder of 4 billion humans. These are not requests. They are facts." Velthos stiffened. "You cannot dictate terms to the Velkoth Dominion. We are an ancient and proud people. We will not submit to what? The species you tried to exterminate?" Vance leaned forward. "You had your chance to treat us as equals. You chose instead to slaughter us in our sleep. Now you will learn what happens to those who make that choice." She cut the transmission. The battle began an hour later. The Velkoth fought with the desperation of those who know they are doomed. Their ships threw themselves at the human formation, hoping to inflict enough damage to force a retreat. It was not enough. Human weapons tore through their defenses. Singularity torpedoes swallowed cruisers whole. Cascade missiles turned dreadnoughts into expanding clouds of debris. And behind it all, visible to everyone on Velkoth Prime, the Helios array powered up. The Velkoth population watched the sky and saw their end approaching. Millions packed temples and public squares, praying to gods who seemed to have abandoned them. Parents held their children close. Elders closed their eyes and waited. Then the human ships stopped firing. They formed a perimeter around the planet and waited. No weapons discharged. No threats were broadcast. They simply held position, demonstrating their absolute power while choosing not to use it. On Velkoth Prime, something changed. The population had expected death. They had been prepared for death. Instead, they received something far more devastating to their pride. Mercy. Not the mercy of equals. The mercy of a conqueror who could destroy them but chose restraint. It was a message more powerful than any weapon. "We are not like you. We do not murder civilizations in their sleep, but do not mistake our mercy for weakness." The Velkoth government surrendered 12 hours later. High Commander Velthos was arrested by his own people, dragged from his command center by soldiers who refused to die for his pride. News of the surrender reached the Kethari homeworld before Admiral Okonkwo's fleet arrived. The Kethari government did not wait for a demonstration. They broadcast their own surrender immediately, offering to hand over every official who had participated in planning the betrayal. The war was over. Admiral Vance returned to Earth 6 months later, after overseeing the initial occupation of Velkoth Prime. The blockade was gone. The orbital defenses had been rebuilt. The skies were filled with ships bearing the flags of a dozen nations, united as never before. She attended the dedication of the Betrayal Memorial, a massive structure containing the names of every human killed in the initial attacks. 4 billion names carved into black stone, stretching for kilometers across the plains where New Geneva had once stood. The crowd was silent as she approached the podium. Billions watched across human space, on Earth, and the colonies, and the newly reclaimed worlds. "We did not seek this war," Vance said. "We did not want it. For 200 years, we reached out to the stars with open hands, believing that friendship between species was possible. We were wrong." She paused, gathering herself. "But we learned. We learned that the galaxy is not kind to the weak or the trusting. We learned that peace must be defended with strength. And we learned that humanity, when united against a common enemy, is capable of things that no other species imagined possible. She gestured at the memorial behind her. Let this structure stand as a reminder. To us, so that we never forget those we lost. And to the galaxy, so that they never forget what we became. Her voice hardened. We remember our friends, but we never forget our enemies. The crowd erupted in applause that lasted for minutes. Vance stood silently, accepting their gratitude without joy. She had done what was necessary. She had saved her species from extinction, but she had also become something she never wanted to be, a monster, in the eyes of those who had made her one. Years later, former concordate species began seeking diplomatic contact. Some wanted forgiveness, others wanted alliance. Humanity listened to each one carefully, evaluated their sincerity, and decided case by case. The Ember Fleet remained. Smaller now, but always ready. Because humanity had learned the most important lesson the galaxy had to teach. Trust was a luxury, strength was a necessity, and they would never be caught unprepared again.